Some lakes were dug for a city. This one was left behind by a glacier. On the northwest edge of the Twin Cities, a wide, quiet lake sits inside country that Dakota bands once called sacred hunting ground. Welcome to Beebe Lake Regional Park. We are in Wright County, near the small city of St. Michael, where the growing metro thins out into farm fields and the wooded valley of the Crow River. Beebe Lake Regional Park wraps its trails, oak woods, and restored prairie around the shore of a single glacial lake. Beebe Lake owes its shape to ice. As the last great glacier melted back across Minnesota, it dropped a thick blanket of sand, gravel, and clay called glacial till, and it stranded buried blocks of dead ice in the ground. When those blocks finally thawed, the land above them sank into basins, and the basins filled with meltwater. This lake is one of those hollows, a footprint of ice that vanished roughly 12,000 years ago. The whole landscape carries that same signature. The gentle rises the trail climbs and drops are heaps of glacial debris, and the wetlands between them are shallow kettles where more ice once lay. It was this rumpled, water-dotted till that would later draw farmers, for the same melting that made the lake also spread the deep, fertile soil across Wright County. When the ice was gone, life moved in. This corner of Minnesota became a borderland where the eastern hardwood forest met the open prairie. Tall stands of oak, sugar maple, basswood, and American elm gave way to waving tallgrass on the drier ground. The oaks shading this trail and the prairie the park now tends are the living heirs of that ancient seam of woods and grass. Long before any survey line crossed these hills, this was Dakota country. The Dakota people call this land Mni Sota Makoce, the land where the waters reflect the skies. Later, the Ojibwe moved into the wider region as well. The lakes and oak groves here were homeland and hunting ground, traveled for generations along foot trails that laced the woods and the river valley. Just west of the lake runs the Crow River, a tributary of the Mississippi that drains a vast reach of central Minnesota. The Dakota knew it in their own tongue, and the Ojibwe called it Ondigo Ziabai, the Crow River. Until little more than a century ago, it wound unimpeded through tall prairie grass and mixed hardwood forest, a corridor of water and game that made this whole country worth traveling. In 1851, at Traverse des Sioux and Mendota on the Minnesota River, the Dakota were pressed into ceding vast reaches of southern and central Minnesota to the United States. With the stroke of those treaties, the homeland around these lakes and rivers was open to settlement, and land that had been hunted for generations was suddenly carved into claims for farms and towns. The settlers who came to this exact ground were German Catholics. Beginning in the mid-1850s, families arrived by way of St. Louis, Illinois, and Wisconsin, drawn by the promise of that deep glacial soil. They clustered along the Crow River, cleared the hardwood forest by hand and by oxen, and broke the first farms out of the woods that once covered these hills. In 1856, those families raised a small log church, only 18 feet by 32, on 20 acres near a mill on the bank of the Crow River. A missionary priest named Wenninger dedicated it to St. Michael the Archangel in the first week of September that year, and the parish gave the growing settlement its name. The city of St. Michael, just up the road from this park, grew out of that little church in the clearing. For the rest of the 19th century, the settlers did to this landscape what pioneers did all across the region. They felled the oaks and maples for fields, pasture, and firewood, drained the wet kettles where they could, and turned the glacial till into a checkerboard of crops and grazing. The great woods thinned to scattered lots, and the open lake sat at the center of hard-working farm country. In time, the county set this shoreline aside. Wright County made Beebe Lake a regional park, and today it is built for an afternoon like this one. There is a sand swimming beach, a fishing pier out over the water, a group camp back in the trees, picnic shelters, and better than a mile of trail looping through the woods and along the lake. The old farm lake had become the county's lake. The park is also a gateway. Reaching out from Beebe Lake, a paved regional trail runs several miles south along the county highway toward the town of Hanover, ending near the historic Iron Hanover Bridge that still spans the Crow River. Built with state legacy funds and finished in 2015, it stitches this lake into a longer ribbon of trail through the river valley. The park is not only preserving what remained, it is bringing some of it back. On the sunny ground away from the water, crews have been coaxing native prairie to return, reseeding the grasses and wildflowers that once ran up to the oak line. It is a small, deliberate repair of the tallgrass country the plows erased, growing again a few acres at a time. And it is genuinely alive. White-tailed deer slip through the oaks, herons and geese work the shallows and the marshy edges, turtles bask on the lake, and songbirds fill the canopy over the trail. Ringed by highways and subdivisions, Beebe Lake still holds an unbroken pocket of Minnesota woodland, water, and returning prairie. Every step here crosses a buried story. A glacier scooped this basin and spread the soil. A homeland was named for its shining waters and then signed away. A log church by the river became a town. The great woods fell to farms. And at last a park gathered the shoreline back and began replanting the prairie. Thank you for walking the shore of Beebe Lake with Fru World Explorer. If you enjoyed this quiet trip through Wright County's glacial country, subscribe and come along for the next trail. There is always more to discover, one lake at a time.